All right, so now it's recording, so don't say anything unpleasant. Yeah. All right.
I'm not that kind of guy. I don't think we're that kind of people, so
No.
that never happens.
Right. All right, let me grab that code that you gave me.
Oh, here, I can pass along if you want me to.
No, I got it. All I
Okay.
got to do is just paste it in
I
there.
was looking at it. Sorry, I'm gonna switch back my mind frames again. I was in a deep meeting there, and now I just got out, so I will try and switch back and look at this and I can try and walk you through my thought process, or you can point out right away and just say this is no bueno. Like,
No,
let's try something different.
what you're doing looks great, and going to Google to get help is a great idea too. Well, so you coded the push in the stack class and also the pop, right?
That is correct.
Okay, so those
Even I think I even included reverse list in there as well.
Yep, I see that down here. So with reverse list, let me pull up the.
This is the wrong cable.
I have an adapter I can give you in a minute.
I just grabbed the wrong one at the house.
Okay. Let me look at the Firehose project. What is reverse list supposed to do? Just print the list out?
So no, there's a separate method to print the list. The reverse is actually supposed to basically reverse the stack. Is my understanding.
Oh, it's supposed to actually. It's not printing it in reverse. It's actually reversing it and sort of saving
Yeah.
it, right?
Yes. Yeah. So kind of like what I did was I took the approach of got the stack class, created, push and pop methods. So then to actually reverse that, I needed to create a different stack, and then take the list values and push it into the stack one by one. And then I kind of reset list value as the next node and continued to push the values through.
I see.
And then once that stack was created, since it's just a stack, it's not actually a list yet. Well, then I created the linked list by popping out each of the values in the reverse method, the push, or the pop, sorry. So then I created that new linked list. And then once that linked list was created, I then called the print method.
I gotcha.
Maybe that's the wrong way of going about it. I don't know.
So, all right. So here.
It took me a little bit to kind of wrap my head around. Like I get what I need to do. Like I can visualize it, I can talk about it, but it was a little difficult to get it in writing. If that makes sense.
Well, let's run it and see how it looks here. When you run it, what? Line 70. Oh, sign up for free. Somehow I grabbed that when let's try this now.
Say it should work.
Yeah, it looks good. It's working.
Yeah, I got it to work, but maybe it just doesn't make sense.
No. The thing that I was wondering about was this one line here. So like, I'm gonna put a binding pry here. Right?
Yes.
And let's run it again. And so at this point,
yeah, that's right, because the bottom of the list is.
So at this point, stack is the head of the reversed list. Wait,
correct.
Is that right?
Right.
Yeah. Yep. Because stack has a value of 37. And wait a minute. Okay, hold on. Oh no, stack.data
should be
is 37.
Yes, there you go.
I guess my question was, why don't you just return, like, can we just return stack here? You know, instead of making a new node.
Gotcha.
Let's see if it still runs. Undefined method value. Okay. Reverse list. I'm just reverse list and return the value of the new head, which would be the previous tail of the linked list. Okay. I think what you want to... Okay, so we would do stack dot data.
Then that would return the stack.
Yeah, now...
Hey, okay,
that's-
yeah.
And that way you just... Because, does that make more sense? Like, you've
Yeah, it does, and I was kind of stuck there actually. Like last night when I was working on it, I was trying to get that, and I just couldn't get there.
You didn't know how to point to the new head, right?
No, I didn't. No.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to stack something, but then I'm sitting there and I kept looking at stuff, and I'm like, well, I could just call the new linked list basically, and it would spit out everything. So I kind of did like I was like, oh, it works. Okay, great, sweet, euphoria, like, awesome. What just happened? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So if we make that change, then basically everything in here, I'm very happy with it. I think it's great.
Okay, cool.
It's great. So, can I?
Awesome.
What
I
about-
like that better actually. It kind of, I don't know. To me, it simplifies and it cleans it up, and it makes more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So what about? Can I just ask you, in your projects and stuff,
Yeah.
where are you in those?
Okay, so my projects, I'm actually reaching up Flickster. Do you know what the Flickster one is?
Was that like
So
video
there's a
lessons?
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. So it's like a two-sided streaming. They're calling it a marketplace. To me, since I live in the digital marketing world, marketplace to me is like Amazon and eBay, and that's what this is. So this is just basically like a two-sided platform that you can either be a user or an admin. And with that, as an admin, you can create this learning platform that students and users can come in and actually sign up for and use.
Yeah, like Udemy or one of those.
Yes, exactly. It's exactly what it is. I'm more than happy to, let's see here, show you anything that you want.
Well, no,
to see.
I just, it doesn't sound like you get stuck in these. I just wondered basically where you were.
No, not at all. So that's the building the apps. I don't really get stuck. And I've noticed actually within the last like couple weeks, during like the first app or two, you get some error messages, and it would take me a little longer to kind of process and figure it out. But now, like if I run something and I get an error message, I'm finding that I can kind of quickly figure it out. I'm messages a lot quicker now, so I'm not really getting hung up on any of that. It's more or less like the challenges is where I kind of get stuck, and I think in the algorithm stuff. And the way I translate it is that you're spending so much time building these apps that we really don't focus on the algorithms. And when we do, it's like, hey, here's a challenge. It's not it's not guided at all. It's basically just kind of thrown at you and like figure it out. And then that's where I really kind of like, I sit down and it eats up a lot of my time. But,
well, maybe we can take some time today and talk about just the Rails framework a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to go through anything and learn anything. I was actually going to I'm trying to catch up a little bit. I was sick a few days last week and everything, so I kind of felt just like a day or two behind of like my internal goals of where I'd like to be. So I'm just going to try and catch up over the long weekend. And then my thought was maybe next week too, I wanted to, as a personal goal, try and take on were some code wars, or just kind of try and tackle small individual challenges, if you will, like on a daily basis, and maybe we could kind of run through those next time we get together.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Well, I know that, when Firehose is sending you through these applications, it's a decision they've made, and I understand the decision. They don't spend too much time drilling too deeply into the Rails framework. They're just more like, type this, and
Yeah, no, that's exactly what it is. And I made a note of that the other day. I was going to ask you, is there any way I can become more like familiar? Yes. And I was going to say something about a sandbox. If I can just like get in like the console or something and just kind of dig around and get more familiar with stuff.
Yeah. Well, the best, there's a book you should get. It's called the Rails. Well, the one I have is called the Rails 4-Way, but you probably should buy the Rails 5-Way. It's by this guy named Obi Fernandez, and it's probably like an 800-page book. It's a little scary looking, but it's basically explaining the Rails framework and how everything works, and you can kind of just pick and choose the stuff that you want to drill into, but it has a lot of examples, and that's the book you need to own that book, basically, if you really want to get really comfortable with Rails. Yep. There's just a few things. I can list them out here. You need to understand routes. You need to understand these things called migrations. You need to understand like how Rails handles resources and routes. I guess that's part of routes. And anyway, if you get really comfortable with that, then you can build things really quickly, because there's certain conventions that everything follows inside Rails when you refer to things and when you edit things. So we could talk about some of that now. So I'm just going to ask you some questions to kind of see where you are. So like,
okay, I will try my best.
Well, it's okay. So like, first question is like, what is a migration?
So a migration is when you want to make a change to the database.
That's right. So you would write a migration to create a table to hold stuff and create columns in that table. So like, you have a background in business, you know about spreadsheets and databases. So they're basically just containers for tabular data. And in the old days, I guess, when you wrote software that had a database as a back end, which pretty much any software that's worth anything has something like that, then you might be over here changing your code, and then you realize, we need a new piece of information to store in the database, so then I'll go change the database.
Right.
But think about, and that works if it's just you working in your garage on your personal project. But what if you're working on this project with like 3 other people? Then you're done working and someone else wants to take over on the weekend, and you have to email them and say, hey, you got to add this column to your database. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
So these problems were common, and anyway, one way around it is the code that manages all these database changes is part of the same project. And so that's what migrations are. You create a migration to do everything, to delete something, add something, modify your back-end table structure. Now everybody who works with you, if they just want to have the exact same schema, which is, a schema means like a definition of the database, all they have to do is pull down the most recent code, run the migrations, and then everybody is looking at the exact same schema, that's really valuable when you're working with other people.
Okay.
So, these days, I think people would say, well, that's insane to work with a database without using migrations, and I agree, but in the old days, I guess we just suffered a lot.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the projects I worked on were like stuff like that. Okay, so like when you
so I guess so I'm trying to think too of like in a setting like that when you're working with a team and you create a migration, and your code is then kind of updated on where you're kind of storing it, say on GitHub or whatever. once you create the migration, oh, no. The migration hasn't been sent to GitHub unless you tell it to go to GitHub. So never mind. Okay, so you could actually create a migration, and if you didn't update where the code was being, I'm drawing a blank on that word right now.
What, pushed? Committed?
Yeah. Of where it's pushed, then yeah, somebody else working on it, they're gonna be like left in the dust and struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. So as an example, so let's make this a Git repository, okay? And then and I'll just okay. So we have we're on the master branch, and I'll check out a branch, called new table or whatever. And I can make a migration, right?
Yep.
Rails generate migration, and I might say, well, if I generate a model, then Rails will automatically create the migration to create that model in the database. So I'll call this model, dog, and it's got a name. Real simple. And you can see that Rails will generate some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things it made is the migration file, which if we go look at it, it's real simple. It creates a dogs table with a name and this other stuff. Okay, so if I run that migration, how would I run that? Remember how?
RegDB migrate.
Yep. And it runs the migration, creates a table, and this what happens often is at this point you're like, no, wait a minute. I also needed to record the number
Yes.
of something else. So it's just like you're saying, because nothing has been pushed up to, we're just on this branch. It's a working branch, so we can undo this. So a way to undo what you just did is you would say rakedb rollback. I think that's how it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so then it goes backwards, and the migration is still here. Where is it? Here it is.
Yeah. So it still keeps a record of it there, but you can keep going. So what actually happens with the rollback? I've had to do that once, and I didn't quite fully understand.
Well, it rolled back one migration. See how these migrations they're numbered? See how the numbers here? And this number is actually the date. It's May 25th, whatever. So when you do rakedb rollback, it undoes the last migration. And then if you do it again, it'll go back one more level. So hypothetically, you can incrementally undo your entire schema just step by step. And that's extremely destructive if you've got a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah.
But usually rollback works like this. You would roll it back, and then I might just delete this file. I might just be like, you know what? I'm just going to start over. I just delete it. So now it's gone. And so now if I run rakedb migrate, there's just nothing to do. So you can roll back to undo a migration, then just delete that file, and then you're kind of back to where you started.
Yeah, so you need to create a new migration. So if you do a rollback, you do not want to go in, and that doesn't mean just because you're going to do a rollback that means that migration file is open to edit. It basically just means I'm going to forget about it. You have the ability to delete it and then just basically start a new migration.
Well, that's right. You do have the ability to delete it and start a new one, but what's actually more common is you roll it back to edit that migration and then run it again. So what you just said you shouldn't do, you can do that, right? So let me destroy the dog model too. So all those files will be gone. Okay, so we're kind of back where we started. So if I make a model called dog, and it's got a name, and the migration is there, and then I run the migration, and then I'm like, oh, I forgot to add the number of legs. So then I would do rakedb rollback, and so it's undone. And what I would do now is go to that migration here, and previously I deleted it so I could do a brand new one, but I might just come in here and just edit this by hand and then run the migration again. And that's a very common use case of the rollback. you roll back, you change that one migration that still needs to be run, and then you migrate again. And then I might be like, oh, I forgot to add the gender of the dog or something. So then I might roll back again, and then go back to the file and say, I don't care about his name, and then run the migration again. You see what I mean? So rollback just takes you back one step, and then if you want to, you can delete the migration and make a new one, or you can edit that migration. It's just up to you. I think I was just talking to... I just lost him.
Sorry, Phil. I don't know what happened there.
I feel like I just lectured like an empty screen. Did you?
I know. I'm like, man, Phil is on a roll right now, and my stuff is just crapping out. I'm like, no.
I thought I lost him. He's just totally silent.
No. I was taking it in too.
Oh gosh, that just shows how pedantic.
That's
I
all right
can
though,
be,
but it was being recorded, so
yeah,
I can go back.
It was. It's all recorded. You can go listen to it later. I was like, he's not responding. But basically,
Sorry,
what I was saying
I don't know what happened there. I was watching it, and then all of a sudden, the teammate kind of froze, and then my computer just locked up, and so I just rebooted really fast.
Are you back
Sorry.
in the teammate or not?
No, can you send me that link again? I had to shut down everything.
Yeah, I can.
Sorry, I don't know what that was.
Yep, it says that. That was so funny. But basically, okay, I'll paste it in the thing again. See if you can get in. I might have to restart the teammate. Nope, you're back in.
Nope, I'm in.
Okay, so what I was saying was, when you roll back, it just undoes that it undoes it undoes whatever that migration had operated upon the database.
Okay.
And you have the option of, you can edit that migration and then run it again. So you can go into it and modify it. And that's
what's kind of best practice? Should you do that, or should you just delete and start a new migration?
It's just up to you. I mean, I often will delete it just because I am very comfortable with the generators that Rails uses to create those migrations.
Okay.
I don't really... I guess I'm more comfortable with letting the generators do most of the work than I am going in and editing it by hand. But you might, like, let's roll this one back. So I roll back the most recent migration, and then you pull it up here. I mean, if I just want to add like another field and call it name, or breed or something, this is very easy to do.
So that's acceptable.
Totally acceptable, and I would say very common. Very common. Sometimes you go in and edit migrations anyway, because like you might run it and you might be like, oh, I wanted to, this needs to be an index or something like that. Or that doesn't even make sense. That would be an index. But like, I don't know. That doesn't make sense either. But you might be like, I want to index that column. Maybe that's something you guys haven't talked about, but then you'd roll it back and then you'd roll it forward like that. Indexing means... sorry. Anyway, I don't want to talk about
So if you... that just doesn't even make sense. I was getting ready to ask you a question. I was like, so if you were like 2 or 3 migrations ahead, but you wanted to go back and edit something like in this migration...
You could totally do it.
You don't need to go...
You can do it, but you would never do it if you've pushed that migration up into
There you go.
GitHub. If it's possible that someone else has it, if it's even possible, you don't want to do that.
Okay.
So like,
gotcha. So if you're still like local, like it's okay, but the minute you push it, like you should not be doing that.
You shouldn't do it. So here's an example: is you realize down the road, like I misspelled the name of a column,
Yep.
like somehow I did, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Something like that,
Yep.
And then you're like, well, I'll roll back, but then you realize, well, someone else may have pulled it down. So then in that case, you have to make a new migration that it just renames the column.
Okay.
It would positively edit the database. And that means like
Yep.
from then on out, for like forever, when all these migrations are run, you're always going to create that column with the misspelled name, and then right afterwards you're going to change this name. It's no problem. That's just
Okay.
how it's going to be.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Makes sense.
those are migrations, and you can do things. Rails has a lot of really cool generators to make migrations. Like you can do things like we have this dogs table now, right?
Yep.
Right? And so if you want to add a column to the dogs table, well, you can go look up how to do that. There's a specific, like you can make a generic migration, like, do something. And what that'll do is it'll create a migration file that basically it's basically just kind of empty.
And then you need to go tell it, like, change this table, this
Yeah.
string to
Yeah,
whatever.
and you can give it all these instructions, and you can go look that up. That's no problem. But what I like to use is Rails generators. So I say Rails migration, and I can say, if you say something like add something, new columns to dogs, Rails is smart enough to know that you want to add, if you start it with add and you end it with the name of the table, Rails is smart enough to know. So watch this. So I'll say I want to add, what's something about dogs? Diet. That doesn't even make sense. Dad, mom, something. Okay, whatever. See, now check out this migration that Rails makes is,
So it automatically populates it.
see,
So
it knows you want to add a column to the dogs table, and it does it for you.
So in the console, you can actually tell it, after you name the migration, you can actually tell it what to do.
Yeah, it has everything to do with what I named the migration. Because I called it add,
Okay.
I mean, I could have called it, I can call it add anything. I can say this, to dogs. As long as it starts with add and ends with the name of the table, to dogs,
Okay.
I can say,
You could add whatever string,
Yeah.
any type, integers, whatever.
yep, so it's just adding these columns.
Oh, cool.
So that's a helpful tip, because often most of what you're doing with migrations is you're adding and removing. Like you'll create something and then later you're like, oh, we also need this, and then you need to add a column to it. Similarly, you can do this. You can say Rails generate migration, remove from dogs, and I can say sister. I don't even think I need to put I can say sister, brother, dad, mom, diet.
So it's smart enough to know.
It's pretty smart. Yep.
Wow.
See, now when I run these migrations, it just did all this stuff and then negated it.
Cool.
So there's a lot of cool tricks you can, if you look in the Rails guides, online, there's a section on migrations, and there's a lot of really cool things.
Cool.
Okay, let's talk about routes. Do you know anything
Okay.
about Rails routes?
Sure. That's basically your URLs, right?
That's right. That's right. So, inside any web app, the way that you're going to refer to any location or any like form endpoint, when you submit a form, where is that form being submitted? Like all these are just URLs, right? They're just paths. And so what Rails does is Rails makes some assumptions about how you want to refer to things in your system. And it takes a while to learn their convention, but once you do, you can kind of just assume certain things about whatever entities exist in your system and how you want to refer to it. So here's what I mean. Is like one of the things Rails assumes is anything that's stored in a database is going to have an ID that's an integer. That's like fundamental bedrock assumption of Rails. Right?
Okay. Yep.
So like, okay, so we have a dogs table. So if I go into the console and I say, Fluffy is a dog. See the ID there?
Yep.
See, like every migration created that field without even asking. Like it's like you've got to have that. So if I save Fluffy, now Fluffy's ID is 1. And so Rails is like, it's just going to keep track of that number, and every successive dog that gets saved is going to have a different ID, and they usually just go up numerically.
Yep.
So you know this, right?
Yes, I follow. Yes.
All right. So every time that you want to refer to any entity in the system, Rails is going to use that number to find it. And so every path or route is going to need an ID. Okay, so what does this mean as far as routes go? So let's go look at the routes file. And let's see here. I'm going to just delete everything. And so it's clean. And so what Rails does is Rails uses this thing called resources. You ever seen this?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can define, routes by hand and have them point to certain controllers and stuff, but let me show you what happens here when we do this. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do rake routes. Rake routes will show all the routes in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And
So right now we've got nothing, right?
we got nothing, and it just told us so. So, but if we do this, resources, what we're saying here is like, hey, in my application, I have this resource. It's called a dog, and can you please generate all the routes that I could possibly need to manage this resource? And so that means Rails is going to say, okay, well, you must want to list them. That's index. You must want to show them. Maybe you want to create them. Maybe you want to delete them. Maybe you want to update them. Maybe you want to... Am I missing some? Anyway, those are the main ones.
Yeah.
So Rails is going to make routes for all this. So check this out. So now when we go here and we're going to rake routes again, ta-da, we got all these routes.
Yes.
Now, if you do any serious Rails programming, you're going to spend a lot of time here looking at routes because...
Yeah, this last one we're working on with the whole multiple users and multiple paths and how to get to things and nesting URLs, like,
ooh,
yeah, it was starting to take it to another level there towards the end.
yeah. Okay, so there's basically 4 columns here, and each column is really important. Okay, so you need to understand what all these are. So let's just start with the the top, the very top one there. See the one that says dogs get, and on the right it says dogs index.
Yep.
Okay, so that is a route, and the prefix is like inside your...
Like you could access it in your app through like dog's path.
That's right. It's what's prepended to path and URL. So inside your Rails app somewhere,
Like,
or in a view, you might say link to
dog's path.
all
Or
dogs,
link to whatever, and then
you know,
it's dog's path.
and then it would be dog's path, just like that.
Okay.
You can also do this, and do you know what the difference is between these two things?
Ooh, no, I do not.
Well, path will just show the relative URL. So inside your HTML code, you'll see something like, it'll be like /dogs,
Mm-hmm.
but the URL will show the actual fully formed, wherever you are, it'll unpack it. There's some places where you need that to happen. You don't.
When would that occur?
Well, one example is like if you're sending out an email newsletter or something, and there's certain links in that newsletter, they're going to point to stuff on your site. Then those links in the newsletter need to be fully formed domain names plus the path, because when the person gets the email, if the link just goes to /dogs, then Gmail's going to say what's that?
It doesn't understand. Yeah. Okay.
And there's other occasions where you may need it, but that's just one.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway.
Yeah. So really, anytime basically you're you're outside of your application, you need to use URL because the dog's path is understanding that you're within the app.
Right. Yeah. So if there's a chance that the link will be encountered outside of the context of a page on your website, then you need to use URL.
Okay.
Probably you'll go through the whole Firehose curriculum and never need to use URL. It's just something to know about. Maybe you will, but anyway, yeah. So going back here, the prefix is the thing that preprints past. So like somewhere in your code, you're like, I want to create a new dog, and so you might that would be new dog path, just like that, because see that new dog prefix.
Yep.
Okay, now notice that there's a column called verb there. Do you know what that means?
So get is like you're fetching the data and it's going to populate a new page. Yes, no. Post is going to say like a form or create something new. It's going to post that data to said database. Patch. Am I on the right path?
Yeah, kind of.
Patch, put, delete. I haven't really used a whole lot of those.
Yeah.
It's mainly the get and post. So it looks like patch and put, you would need to update something. Oh, yeah, we have used the delete. So like maybe on like a button or something, if somebody created something, you created a button on your app on that page and you gave that user access that said, oh, we messed up on this, we need to delete it. You could use that controller action there and it would basically destroy all that information.
Yeah. So
now I'll let you tell me.
Well, I was thinking like, I have like a layman's understanding and probably someone's going to hear me explain this and go, oh my gosh. But every HTTP request, it doesn't stand alone. When it comes to a web server, it comes with one of these verbs. So the request the URI might be to /dogs, right? And you can see that there's URIs that are identical there, like the top two. They both are /dogs, but they correspond to two very different actions in the controller. One is supposed to list all the dogs, and the other one is supposed to create one dog. So it's very different. And so kind of behind the scenes, because you don't really see these verbs.
No, you don't.
Behind the scenes, every one of these requests is coming with a verb. And when the controller in Rails gets it's not even the controller, when the router gets this request, it looks at the verb and it'll send the request to the appropriate controller based on the verb. Okay, the point is, you don't even have to worry about that. But the point is, the verb really matters. And you have to remember to concern yourself with whether a request is a GET request or a POST request or whatever. So anytime, here's something that's helpful. Anytime you can type something into the URL of like a browser, that's always a GET request. I mean, those are always
and
GET
get's
requests.
kind of like the default verb in your application too, right?
Yeah, it is. In most, like the link helpers and stuff, if you don't specify any verb, it's going to assume GET, right? That the method for that request is going to be GET. Sometimes it says verb out here, but inside Rails, it's method, which is a little bit confusing. Anyway, so when you have these two links are going to be GET requests. Okay, so let's look at this one here. See the one that's fourth from the bottom?
The dog get.
Mm-hmm. Now, how does that URI pattern? Oh, well, okay. Before we do that, you see how the URI pattern for the very top one, the index one, it has that parentheses, and then it has a dot, and then there's a colon format. Okay.
Mhm.
What that means is that the parentheses means there's an optional parameter that could be here in the it's optional.
So there's an optional param, and the colon format would that be like the value that you'd be passing through?
Yeah. So basically, the colon format is the I guess you could say the variable, or that is the variable that's going to hold whatever is put here. That doesn't make sense. All right,
No, I get it though. Yeah. No, it does.
let me make I'm going to make a control. I'm going to do this thing called a scaffold. Okay. Ugh. And I'm going to do a cat, and the cat will only have a name. Okay, so this will be real. What did I do wrong? Rails generate scaffold. What is it complaining about? Ugh, it's complaining because I have all this nonsense in here. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to make a scaffold for cats. Scaffolds are kind of cool because, check this out, what it made. It made a cat model, which is real simple, but it also made a cat controller, and it's got all the code in here to edit, create, update, destroy cats. Isn't that neat?
What?
So sometimes I use these to.
Well, that's crazy. It just made everything.
Yeah, and it actually made but actually I'm not happy with it because let me destroy this thing.
You didn't have to go in and tell it like what you didn't have to go to the controller and then create the action like
No.
Did I see that it just created all of it?
Yeah, it's a good place to go if you just want to like get a sense of the. I'm going to delete this JBuilder gem because that's why I put all that JSON stuff in there. Let's try it again. Okay, Rails generate, like we could say, truck. Cat's fine. Cat has a name. The cat has a good enough. Oh, scaffold. Okay.
That's wild. Cool.
Okay, so here we are in the cat's controller, and you've spent some time in controller, so it should look a little bit familiar.
Yeah, it does. It's just I'm used to it being blank, and I've got to go in and fill it up.
And so we should have. Let's look in the routes file. Yep. See, it put resources cats up there.
Okay. So then so the scaffold like just takes care of everything. It creates the routes, controller model. I mean, it does it all.
It does. It does. Now, most people, like when you're first starting in Rails, you use them a lot. Like you'll generate a scaffold and then you'll edit it. To like check it out. If let me share my Hangout screen with you. Let's see if this works. Is the screen sharing working?
Yes, there we go. Yep.
Okay, so if I go to cats, migrations are pending. I didn't run my migrations. Okay, so if I go here, see, look, this is what the scaffold did all this. So it's like, do you want to make a new cat? Sure. What's the name of your new cat? Shaggy.
Wow, cool.
Create the cat. So this is the show page. This is the index page. If I want to make another one, I can say, I got a cat named Bill. I got a cat named Sally. Okay. And then I can edit my cat, and so all that stuff's working. And that's, I don't know if you can see that. Make it bigger. So that's
there we go.
That's built into. That's part of the scaffold. All right. So here we are on the index page. Let's go back here and let's go to the cat's controller and the index page. So here's the view. This look familiar?
Yeah.
And it lists out, and scaffold did all this for us. It's nice. So, you can.
That's what I'm like. I'm not used to seeing all this. That's crazy.
So
That just like saves so much time.
yes, it does. It does. So if I want to sometimes I just hate Rails. They're just so shortcut crazy. But like for every line on here, they have this link to show the cat. Now, so based on the paths here that you see here, like how would you create a link to show one cat?
Cat path.
Yeah, cat path.
Because that's going to pull in the ID of the one cat you're looking for.
Right. So the difference between the cat. The reason I did this was to show you something about the format. Okay, so let me go back to that. Sorry, I just wanted you to see something about it. So like we're on the index page, and you see how there's this optional parameter. Look on my web page. If I do cats dot Allen or something like that, and I hit enter. You see how it accepted that as a valid path? Like it, because it's expecting something in the form of dot something.
Okay.
Now look, if I leave off the dot, it's going to break. It's like we don't have a route like that. But you can see this path is expecting an optional dot something parameter. And so I can put anything in there. So if I put dot Allen, and now let's go back to the index. I'm going to put a binding pry here, which is not going to work because I don't have pry installed. Now I do. There we go. Okay, so watch this. Okay, when I go, I'm going to refresh this page. You know about binding pry, right? We've used binding pry.
Yes.
So you know what it's going to do, right?
I think that's cool.
Look, so, stop. Undefined method pry because I didn't restart my server. Now let's try it again. Every time you change the gem file, you got to restart the server. Okay, so because pry was there, you see how the server stops?
Yep.
Okay, so the route was not expecting, but the route allowed for an optional format parameter that would follow a dot. Okay, so since we supplied it, check this out. If I look in the params,
oh, it's there, format.
it's there.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
So, yeah, that is.
Now, why is this?
Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of weird to me.
Okay, so let me leave it off. Let's exit, and it's going to show our cats. And I'm going to delete Allen and just run it. And it stops here again. Let's look at the params. See, it's gone, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the reason
Because you're not passing anything through.
I'm not there's no parameter. I mean, there's no format parameter. So what is that? What is the purpose of that format parameter? It's this. It's Rails is making an assumption that like you have this basic operation to list out this resource, which happens to be cats, okay? And Rails is saying, what if somebody wants to return like a JSON response? You know, JSON is like a, an API might. It's a way that you would package data for an API. Or what if you want to request a PDF of all your cats? See, then you would request cats.pdf, and then in your controller, basically in your controller right here, you would do stuff like based on the format. If the format is PDF, then do this. If the format is HTML, do this. If the format, and that's why that's there. And so sometimes in Rails controllers, you'll see all this stuff happening based on the format that's coming in. And when I was just getting started, I'm like, where like, where are they getting that from? And it's from that optional path parameter.
Okay. I always kind of wondered what that was. Like every time every time I'll do like array routes and I'm looking up everything, I'm always kind of like, I didn't know what like the format meant. It just happened to be on just about everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's the format. So, like, going back to these rake wrap, man, I'm getting so many notifications in Skype. It is driving me crazy. Let's see if I can turn it off. How do I do that? Do not disturb. That's right. Okay. So now, this, if we want to show one cat, right, then that's cat path. Cat path. But you see the parameter there, or the parameters that are there. There's an ID there.
Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah. Yep.
Now there's no parentheses around that ID. So what does that mean?
That it's going to go to said ID, said cat.
Yeah. Well, it means since there's no parentheses around it, it means that's not an optional parameter.
Yeah, it's required.
It's required. So how do we know it's required? Like, how can we show that it's required? Well, let's go here, and like down here at the bottom under new cat, if I just want to make like a silly show cat thing, and I just put cat path, and watch what happens when I refresh my page here. Oh, hold on a second. Let me get rid of this binding pride. Oh, I did. Okay. So if I refresh this page, boom, it breaks. And do you see the error here?
Yes.
Right here. And it
No route matches.
says no route matches. And the nice thing is, I tell you, this error has gotten so much more helpful because it says we're missing a required key ID. But in the old days, it just would say no route matches. And you'd be like,
Good luck to you.
yeah, and you had to kind of go, yes, it does. And then it's like, no. A route isn't just the path. It's not just the / whatever. It includes all the parameters that are required. And some routes require multiple parameters. Like a nested resource might require the ID of the course, and then another ID of the video that's in the course. It might require both. So
Yep.
anyway, so down here in going back there, if I want this to work, there's a lot of different ways to go about this. So I can do this. I can say ID is 5. I can just make one up. Rails won't care. There is actually no fifth cat. But watch. But Rails doesn't care. And so if I hover over show cat here, you can barely see at the bottom. Do you see that link that's showing up at the bottom of the browser?
Yeah.
See, it says cats /5.
5. Yep.
And then if you go look at, let's go look back at the routes, and you can see that that matches exactly what should be there. Cats /ID.
Yep.
Okay, so here, that's one way to link to a cat. There's many ways to link to a cat. Another way is because Rails just assumes that, because the number one way that Rails identifies objects in the framework is with the ID.
If you do like params bracket :ID, and that would pass the parameters of said.
Oh, you mean of the ones? Well, look, I'm just saying, for cat path, you have to have this ID parameter. So if I call this something else, that's going to break. Watch. If I refresh this, see, it says, because it's like we have to have something to put into the ID. So this will work if I don't even tell it what parameter I'm supplying and I just give it a number. It'll still work. Rails is going to say, well, he must be, since he didn't say, that must be the ID.
Okay.
And what's funny is I can do stuff like this. I can say the ID is, it won't work down here. Like if there were a cat, in this scope right here, I could say cat.id, right?
Yeah, and yeah, okay, yep, yep.
But I can also just say cat. And this is where it gets confusing. But Rails is going to say, look, he's just giving us a cat. We're expecting a number. Let's just use the ID of whatever this thing is. So that's actually what's happening up here, because what actually is happening up above is this. You see this up here?
Yeah.
Like that's what
Yep.
they're doing, is they're linking to the show path, and all they're passing is a cat, and it's kind of like they're basically doing all four of these things, but the Rails way is to make assumptions. Rails just makes assumptions all the time. And it can get really confusing, because you'll look at one of these links and be like, well, how do I... It doesn't really tell you that much that's useful in constructing one.
Yep.
Anyway, so what's happening here is they're passing in this object that has an ID, and the link to helper is saying, oh, well, this thing they gave me has an ID, and I only have one parameter, and that's an ID, so I'll just make a bunch of assumptions about it and create the link, and it works.
Okay.
Same thing here with edit cat path. Like, this could be this, it could be this, that would work. It could be this, that would work, and it could be this, that would work. They would all work.
Okay.
And I'm just telling you this because when you work in Ruby or Rails world, you see all those different versions of it, and they're all identical.
Okay.
So when you have show and edit, those verbs for those are get verbs. So you can see there's no method listed here. But maybe a better one to look at would be, well, let's go back to the controller, like here for new. Let's go to the form. Well, that's not that helpful. Rails just does so much behind the scenes. Anyways, I don't know. Have I talked your ear off enough?
No, I like it. I could listen to you go on for days. I really could.
All right. Well, let's see here.
No, I like it though. No, I get it. It just adds more to it. It's when I listen to you kind of go and talk about it a little more in depth. It makes complete sense. It just layers on additional.
Yeah.
That I'm taking in through Firehose, because they layer it on like you said, and you kind of just, they're like, well, do this, and then I think you just pick up on it and you figure it out by your own self-discovery and diving in and understanding it. But then just listening to you talk about it kind of reinforces.
Yeah. Well, one thing that can be helpful with routes is like you can see, like, we only have two things in the system and we're already staring at half a screen full of routes. And what's quite common is, when you first start working with some resource, you might realize, like, all I need to do is list this out. I don't need to actually, I'm not creating or deleting or whatever. So you can just say only, and then it's like you can kind of list out the actions that you want to do. Like, I only want to show one and show a bunch, and I'm not going to be involved in creating any of these things. Oops. So, like, if you do that, now let's go back and look at our routes. It's it'll only show the routes that you actually need, and those other ones won't exist. And that can be really helpful. Does that make sense? Oh, I lost you again, didn't I? I knew it. Every time he gets quiet, I'm like, he must have been lost. Alan. I don't know if that's his internet or mine. All right, Alan. I'm going to call it a day. You're back. Alan? So crazy.
Yeah.
Are you back?